everybody here. Good evening. I'd like to call to order the August 9th, 2010 Lake Washington School District Board of Directors meeting. I guess I'd say we interrupted our summer to come, but we don't have one.
The weather helped.
So much for that. The board has just come from our work session where we talked about technology and got some updates and all the interesting things that will be going on in the district this year. So I'll entertain an approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Did you have something you wanted to pull
Oh, yeah.
before we do that?
Gosh, sorry, let me find my giant stack here. It was the one about the policy about e-learning. Which tab is that?
Which tab?
That's tab 12.
Yeah, 12, I guess.
I'll move we approve the agenda with tab 12 pulled. Is that the only one, Ravi?
Yeah.
That's the online versus the alternative,
yeah.
right?
Uh-huh.
Okay, tab 12.
Sounds fine to me, too.
Okay, so we have a motion to approve the agenda with tab 12 being pulled into non-consent. In a second, would all those in favor please say aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? There was a lot of good reading in this consent agenda, by the way.
I have one quick thing. I don't know where it fits in. I got 2 copies of the Kent School District Agreement. Did anybody miss theirs that wants it under tab 3?
No, I got
I
mine.
might have just gotten an extra copy.
Yeah.
But just checking.
You're just special.
Those were hand inserted, so you may have gotten 2 copies.
Okay.
So would you poll the board, please?
For the consent
Consent
agenda.
agenda.
Yep. Chris?
Did I get a motion to that? No.
I don't think
Let's
we got a
back up.
motion to that.
I'll move approval.
Motion. Okay, Doug, a move approval of the consent agenda. We did the agenda. Now I'll take a second.
Second.
Now poll the board.
Chris?
It's been a while since I've been here.
Yes. Nancy?
Yes.
Jackie?
Yes.
Doug?
Yes.
Ravi?
Yes.
I was looking for public comment first. That's why I
yes.
was confused.
Yes, well, we have nobody signed up for public comment. I'm sorry. That's me, too.
We don't?
It's been a while since I've been here.
No problem.
Yes.
Have audience today.
We didn't have anybody sign up for public comment. We are going to have a public hearing on the budget, and so anybody that wants to speak to that, we will have you speak at that time. But does anyone in the audience want to speak about anything else?
Apparently not.
Okay, nobody was running up to the microphone. So we now did that,
Yep.
too.
Jackie, also under tab 16, we usually like to talk about the donations
Yes.
that the district receives. In this particular meeting, we have a large set of donations of $72,789. From Lake Washington Schools Foundation to Evergreen Junior High School, we have a donation in the amount of $1,556 to support classroom enrichment for animals and habitat program. A donation in the amount of $16,247 from the Thoreau PTSA to Thoreau Elementary School for playground equipment, a playground structure, benches, library books, and the Readwell Kindergarten program. A donation in the amount of $1,740 from John Muir Elementary School the John Muir Elementary PTSA to John Muir Elementary School to purchase PE and music curriculum materials. From the Albert Einstein PTSA to Einstein Elementary School, $7,983 for providing funding for their specialists, which includes library, music, PE, and supporting their field trip program. Lakeview Elementary PTA to Lakeview Elementary School in the amount of $6,909 to support their teacher training program, and as well as stipends for their outdoor ed program, art, instructional materials, and for some custodial costs for PTSA events. An amount of $1,100 from the Dickinson PTSA to Dickinson Elementary School to support the end-of-the-year gathering for that school. $1,090 from the Rush PTA to Rush Elementary School to support their book fair. $7,249 from the International Community School PTSA to ICS to support expenses for their FBLA program and teacher stipends. $1,055 from the Audubon PTSA to Audubon Elementary School to support their in-house science workshop for their kindergartners. $1,006 from the McAuliffe PTSA to McAuliffe Elementary School to support their half stipend for their field day. $3,937 from the Environmental Adventure School PTO to EAS to support their field trips. $1,807 from the Sandburg PTSA to Sandburg Elementary School to support field trips. $1,006, looks like this is a repeat, so I'm not going to say that one again. $1,500 from an anonymous donor to Redmond Elementary School to support their Lunch Buddy program. $6,099 from the Blackwell PTSA to Blackwell Elementary School to support their outdoor ed program. And $12,500 from the Laird Norton Family Foundation to Rosa Parks Elementary School to support arts and education. Again, for a total of $72,789.
Wow, that's a lot. Diane, would you just, when you file this one to the, would you change the date at the top of the page? It's on the back under the recommendation correctly. It's good that someone else is not on top of things today as well as me. Okay, now to the non-consent items, and the first is about tab 17.
Thank you, Jackie. Tab 17 is resolution number 2060, which authorizes the sale of up to $120 million of bonds approved by the voters in 2006. As you know, we continually monitor the bond market in order to time the sale of our bonds such that it's most attractive to the district. Our general plan over time has been to sell approximately $80 million of bonds per year over the next several years, again, to manage our construction in the pipeline as well as manage our cash flow for that construction. The last bond sale we did was approximately $40 million. This authorizes us to sell $120 million of bonds. We don't have to sell $120 million, but it gives us the authorization to do that. This methodology for approving, you essentially give me, the superintendent, the authorization over the next 60 days to approve the sale of those bonds. And what this does is this gives us maximum flexibility in order to get all the paper processes in place and in order to time the sale of those bonds so that they can be appropriately advertised and sold. We do have tonight with us Jack Eaton as well as Cynthia Weed, who are available to answer questions about the sale of this bond. This is, of course, a large bond sale, and so I'd like to certainly give the opportunity for the board to ask any questions of me or of Janine or of Jack or Cynthia, who are here with us.
And just to remind our public, these are bonds that were approved in
2006.
Okay. So these were approved for the current modernization plan.
Yes. So this would be considered phase 2 of modernization. And just as a reminder, phase 2 of the modernization program, again, authorized by the voters in 2006, funds the modernization of 11 schools in 8 years. That includes some schools that are currently under construction, which we've already sold the bonds for, which includes Lake Washington High School. We have Finn Hill Junior High School, which is just starting construction, Muir Elementary School, which is just starting, Keller, which is in the planning stages, Sandburg, which is in the planning stages. So those are some schools that we have that are in the pipeline that we're getting ready to do quite a bit of activity in a very short period of time. This bond sale supports that activity.
So out of the total authorized bond sales, where are we from that 2006?
We've done, is this sale number 3, 80, 40, and now 120? Is that true? Janine will answer that question specifically.
This is the 5th sale. And Barbara, how many do we have left after this sale? So if we sell the entire 120, there would be 36 left of the remaining authorization from February 2006.
Okay.
But basically, this is a combination of the timing in terms of when the money is needed for the construction, but also the most opportune time period in which to get the lowest interest rates, the lowest cost of borrowing.
Correct, Doug. As you know, interest rates are low, so we want to take full advantage of that and sell the maximum we can now. We have a couple of positive things working in our favor. Both the interest rates are low and the construction inflation is low. So we're working on getting projects online as fast as possible to take advantage of those, and selling these bonds now will help us. In addition, there are a number of federal programs through the stimulus, so part of the sale could be through BABS, the Build America bonds, which we did last time. So we want to also take advantage of those opportunities when they're out there, because they really lower the interest rate as well.
And underlying all this is the fact that we have a very strong position as far as our bond rating, so that allows us to borrow at a minimal amount as well. So
Yes,
that's,
it does. In fact, there was a recent relook at comparing the ratings, I guess you will, of governmental entities, and our bond rating was moved to a AAA. So this would be our first official bond sale as AAA rated, which will also help us in the market, positive in the market.
and an editorial comment that is due to the great stewardship both on the part of the board and the superintendent and staff. And so congratulations. That's great.
I would also like to make an editorial comment, and that is that there is a bill that has been floating around called the Jobs Bill, which essentially allows the state to increase their indebtedness over their cap, which could potentially impact our bond rating, because our bond rating is partly predicated on the state's bond rating. And so I just wanted the board to be aware of that actually could cost the district millions of dollars, which is partly also why we would like to get these bonds sold before that potentially could go into play.
Yeah, that was what I was going to ask. Can you keep us updated on how that progresses?
You bet.
Because I am concerned about that.
As am I.
And so, along those lines, given that we've got $36 million left as a potential sixth sale, this is not in any way editorial. I'm just curious why we would reserve $36 million for a sixth sale.
I think well, go ahead, Jeannie, if you want to answer.
When we sell the bonds, we need to have assurances that we will, or have reasonable anticipation that we will spend 85% within 3 years. So it's based on our cash flow schedule. So that's part of the requirements under the tax-exempt bonds.
Can you remind me what was it before we became AAA?
Double A plus, I believe.
AAA plus?
AA1.
Yeah, that's Moody. And so how many basis points do we expect it to save going from AA1 to AAA?
That's probably a difficult question to answer, because it's probably different on every day you go to sell bonds.
Ballpark.
Maybe Jack can answer that.
Stab at this.
Good evening. That's a very difficult question to answer. One, because we've never sold like Washington bonds as AAA, so I don't have a basis. Secondly, it's difficult because the interest rates have driven so low that the differentiation. What I can tell you is it will make a huge difference on the portion of these bonds that we sell as Build America bonds. Those are taxable bonds. The buyers of taxable bonds often are different than the tax-exempt bonds that we sell. Some of which will be large pension funds, maybe even some foreign investors. And that AAA will attract them, and we believe it will, we are sure it'll get you a better rate than if we just went with your prior rating. But in terms of a basis point, I'd hate to say, I could say 2 basis points or 3, but on any given day, that can change because of the volatility of the market now.
Jack, is it also fair to say that because of the current market conditions that less highly qualified bonds are often hard to market?
That's
and
absolutely
also
correct.
hard to sell, and that this
Absolutely.
actually makes these marketable and sellable at a reasonable rate?
It does. And let me just add, too, that the delegation resolution really helps us out, because under the old system, we had to sell the bonds on the day you had a board meeting. So we either had to do it on Mondays, which is not a good day in the market, or we had to ask you to have a special board meeting. So this gives us the ability to act very quickly, keeping Janine and Barbara and Chip in the loop. We market the bonds, we get offers, and before they can go away, we can sign the deal. So it really is a good advantage for you and able to attract the best possible rates.
And with this, over this series of bonds since '06, we've been able to save the taxpayers quite a bit because of the way and how they're sold and looking for the best interest rate, which is good for our people in the community.
Yeah, and a number of the bonds from the 98 issuing, Jack actually helped us refinance those bonds because the rates became so attractive, and it saved the district literally millions of dollars in interest payments as a result of the refinancing of those bonds.
I also want to point out, in addition to the state potential jeopardy of the state bond rating and using your AAA rating, the Build America bond program as currently legislated ends December 31. Now, there is an attempt to extend that, but they're going to extend it with a lower reimbursement rate. Right now, remember that these are sold as taxable, but you get reimbursed for 35% of the interest cost through the Department of Treasury. If these are reauthorized, it looks like that number is going down to 30% or maybe even 28%. So we want to maximize your return as much as we can on these bonds.
And what are the municipal bond rates around now?
Well, I saw a 20-year municipal bond, a double A, was a double A3, went just earlier this week for like 3.76%. That's a 20-year. A 1-year went for 0.33%.
Wow.
So
1 year, okay.
the irony is that's a higher rate than you can get on a taxable treasury for 1 year.
Really? Ouch.
Nobody's making money on anything.
No, they aren't. Somebody is somewhere, but it's not us, I guess. Okay, good.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Any other questions, Board, before we move for approval?
Move approval?
Okay.
I'll second.
Motion from Doug, Nancy second. All those, no other discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you very much, and we'll look forward to hearing when they're sold and how well we've done.
Great.
Okay.
Thanks, Jackie. Under tab 18, thank you, Jack and Cynthia. Appreciate you being here.
When are we going to go back to 12?
Under
We need to also do 12. Thank you. Do you want to do that before we do the budget?
Oh, sure.
Thank you, Nancy.
Yep.
It's the pulled one.
Yep, okay,
for Robbie.
so if we could go to
Thank you.
tab 12, which is just a little bit of background on this one. There is a new RCW 28A.250.050 that requires districts to adopt a policy around online learning. This was prompted by concerns in the state around fly-by-night online learning shops, if you will, selling services to districts with very little or no quality control, and were driving FTE, which the state was paying for. So this really is an attempt for the state to put into place some mechanism for quality control, and each district is required to adopt a policy. We before the state required this, had our own concerns about quality control and have been dipping our toe into the online learning industry pretty cautiously as a result of that. So this is our first attempt at putting in place a board-approved policy, which is required by law, and I believe that Ravi had a question or two about that policy.
Right. One thing I wasn't clear on from the policy is what like in the first part, it states an online course is one in which more than half of the content is delivered online and more than half of the instruction is delivered online by a teacher from a different location than that of the student. The thing that I'm not clear on is what does it mean for a teacher to deliver instruction online? Like, does it have to be that they're, like if I was a person who was worried about our policy, I guess, like one thing I might worry about is that you just record a bunch of stuff and you throw it up there, and is a pre-recorded lesson count as delivering instruction, or does
John,
it
do you want to
be
answer this since you're steeped into this policy?
Steeped is the word. Ravi, I think I think one thing that, am I picking up okay here? One thing that I think is important to talk about as a little bit of a preamble, if you think about virtual versus actual instruction, online being sort of in the middle, right? It's virtualized in some ways and actual in others. And we've done that deliberately in our approach here. In the industry, it's called a blended model between a live teacher all the time with a student in what we call the instructional core, an interaction between a student, the content, and a teacher. Our conceptualization and this policy represents the view that there's a delivery mechanism that is electronic, but there's also a component that is the teacher directly interacting with students. So your example and your question, I think, was about, could I just record it and send it to them as a video? Video certainly can be an important part of the media that is sent to the student to learn from, but equally important is the role of the teacher interacting either physically, and in our model, we think there is a physical component where they actually come and visit together, but also that kind of interaction that happens through technology-mediated, situations like a chat room or email or other instruction, other Web 2.0 opportunities, blogs, et cetera. So there's this mixture of the real and the virtual. Does that help?
Right, but so when it says more than half of the instruction is delivered online by a teacher, like what does it mean for a teacher online to deliver? Is like the chatting the
Yeah, it could be that chatting. Yeah, let's talk about the online part of it. So if I'm a student and we talked a little earlier this evening in the work session about the communicator space. It's a learning management system in addition to that communication function. So another example of that is Moodle. They're actually technologies that provide electronic format for teachers and students to interact and work together on projects for them to exchange documents and other communications. So that's the online component of that. That would be instructional.
Well, let's see if I'm hearing you right. I think you're asking if the teacher themselves, what do they look like, I guess, as they're delivering this instruction? Is that what you're asking?
I'm asking, is it like a live teacher?
Yeah, is it live?
Yeah, is it a live teacher? Is it a video?
Can a videotape suffice as an online, that is being delivered via videotape? Is that considered online?
No. Not exclusively. A component of the instructional practice.
So
would be
by
online.
this definition, it says 50%. So if 50% of the instruction is being done by a teacher in a classroom at a school, and 50% is via videotape, it's a teacher somewhere else, and it's static, it's videotape, does that qualify under this definition? It's a question of definition, I think is what Rabbi
No, I don't
is.
think so. I think in terms of videotape, no. Sending them a videotape. If you had more than half, as this description says, that is mediated by a web, could be a video conference even. We have resources to do that with kids. As long as the interaction between the student and the teacher are instructional, that would be considered, and mediated through technology.
So I think Ravi's question, and I think it's a fair question, and we should probably come up with some language to reflect that, is that while you standing here are making that definition isn't clear.
Yeah, isn't
Right.
written.
And
in.
so
Okay.
what we probably need to do is build language that says the online that is online away from the site, it looks like this.
Yes,
That's what
right.
you're looking for.
And
Because I know we're going to have people that will ask that question
Yes.
in the community.
Exactly, right. And I'm not saying you need to pin down exactly what it looks like, but
Right.
it should be more clear what kinds of things would fit and what wouldn't.
John, is there a timeline around the adoption of this policy?
It needs to be
Yes.
adopted before the end of the month, but I believe the board has another.
We have a
Okay, so-
meeting on the
opportunity.
23rd.
So
But
what
this
I-
is part of the procedure, not the policy. Does that matter?
They're both there.
The
this
definition
is
wasn't
The
in the
definition is
policy.
in the.
Yeah.
But since we have a meeting, why don't we go ahead and I'd suggest we pull this we'll change the language and then put it on the meeting agenda for the 23rd. That'll meet his deadline, and that way we can be pretty clear about the language.
Okay, we didn't have a meeting scheduled for the 23rd, just a work session, I
Well, we
thought.
did, but
It just got.
We just got changed?
we're going to do a meeting as well because we have
We
a,
have our capital plans to
Yeah.
approve that night, too.
Okay.
So we have two things
Is there
to briefly
definition
approve.
in the legislature?
well,
Legislate-
they gave us a sample policy, so it's
Sample
not
policy.
sample policy. And most of this was drawn from that sample policy. But I because it came up, I think it's fair to go ahead and
It's not a
be.
great definition.
No.
No. Well, and I think we've already had somebody ask this year about our online policy and what vendors and things like that. So I know that along the way, someone will tell us what the teacher role is in this policy. Or will someone try to push the envelope if it's not clear enough about what they're doing as a teacher or want to do.
So we'll go ahead and change the language to reflect Robbie's comments and I think the consensus on the board, and we'll bring it back to the August 23rd board meeting.
Did you have anything else in here?
No, that's it. Thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Anybody else, any questions in here? Well, we've got it here. Okay, so it'll come,
Just one additional piece of that, which is part of, in the types of online courses, you get into courses, number 2, courses may be offered but are inaccessible due to scheduling or other factors. That's something where time shifting, if it's involving lectures, I can see lectures being delivered less than interactively,
Yeah.
with interaction around assignments and things like that. Anyway,
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not saying.
I'm sure that John will bring it back to our team for discussion.
yeah, because it's kind of taking
Yeah.
number 2 into
Yeah.
account when you're doing the definition.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we'll send you all back to the drawing board a little bit
Yep.
for that. So, okay,
Tab 18, Jackie, is Resolution 2063, which is the public hearing and adoption of the budget. We brought to the board for your consideration the 2010-2011 budget at the June 21st board meeting, and Barbara did a great job of presenting that budget to the board. The statute also requires that the board hold a public hearing on the budget, and that is tonight. Just as a summary, we do have a general fund budget of $225 million, an ASB fund of $3.9 million, a debt service fund of $49.2 million, a capital projects fund of $137 million, and a transportation vehicle fund of $1.9 million for the 2011 10-11 school year. I also did want to just mention that from garnering the public trust around this kind of money, as an administration, we take a pretty conservative view on how we handle the public's money. We try very diligently to make sure that we're using those resources wisely. We also budget conservatively so that we do not put the district at risk in any way, shape, or form. And we do this in a way where we fund our priorities so that we intentionally spend money where it will impact achievement. And that is often found in the classroom. So I wanted to give that as a preamble to the board as you contemplate the public hearing and then ultimately the budget.
And on a related matter, there was this, I think it was either today or yesterday, story in the Seattle Times about the fact that several of our neighboring districts are going to find themselves going out to the public again for extending their debt capacity. And I think it's my understanding that your staff and your staff were farsighted enough to plan for, basically anticipate the fact that things would change to the extent that we might need additional capacity, and so we're not going to need to go out to the public for another vote. I was wondering if you want to comment on that.
Yeah, that's accurate, Doug. And this last legislative session, it was a bit of a crapshoot, to be honest with you. There was budget cutting and capacity building simultaneously, and many of us were up for levy elections. And so what we did is we did our best job that we could in anticipating what may be possible as it relates to levy capacity, while at the same time not being overarching as it relates to the possibilities, and trying to be sensitive to the tax rate and the taxes that our citizens are paying. What was ultimately passed was a 4% levy lid lift, as well as some grandfathering capability. We did pass the majority of that capacity, but not all of that capacity for the 2011 calendar year. We are not, I'm not suggesting we go out and grab that capacity. It's not a lot of money. It's, I think, $1 million or $2 million. Is that right, Barbara? Something like that. And in the grand scheme of things, it is money, but it would require us to go back to the voters for another vote for that small amount of money. In 2012, 2013, and 2014, using the current budget assumptions, which, as you know, those change every year, we would have the capability of what was currently voted on in 2010 to collect the full amount up to the lid. So we think that we are striking that fine balance between projecting what we think may happen, being able to collect the maximum according to the law, and being sensitive to where our taxpayers are and what our taxpayers are telling us around what they would like us to collect. And again, that is a tricky balance, and we think that we're on the good side of the problem at this point.
Well, and parenthetically, it would cost us $100,000 to conduct an election.
That's correct.
So, you know, that saves us some money, and additional money.
Okay, what I'd like to do is, I think, let's do the public hearing first, and then at that point, we'll come back to the board when the hearing is closed to see if there's any other, we'll put the motion on the table and have any further discussion that needs to happen from the board. I just want to reiterate what Chip said, that tonight you will not see the presentation of the budget, which was done at our last board meeting, and Barbara I was not here, but I did view it afterwards, and very nice job. Thank you, Barbara, and a very thorough job of what each of these measures are, each of the funds are, and that. So that is available, and for those who would like to see it, can certainly view it on the internet, because all our meetings are taped and available there. So what I'd like to do is open for public hearing. So if anyone in the audience is interested in speaking on the budget, or
Jackie.
please come forward.
Jackie.
Sean, are we on this center podium?
Also, is Barbara going to report on what input we've had over the web?
I will
and
ask
for
her to
other
do
people?
that, yes. We can do that as part of your question during discussion. Now, would you like to come forward? No, I'm going to have Barbara do a report. Would you report on any public information you've received? But we can do that after the public hearing. Okay. Yes, no problem. If you just, as you come up, just tell us who you are. Many of us know you, but not everybody. Haven't seen you in a while.
Yes. When you made the personnel assignments for superintendent and deputy superintendent, I didn't think I needed to come anymore. My name is Sharon Hood. I live on Education Hill in Redmond. I've been in the district 28 years. I've worked at various levels, sometimes to annoy the board, sometimes as an advisor, and sometimes in the buildings. I came to pay probably my last respects to the superb process and the sacrifice that I know that especially our deputy superintendent has made over at least 15 years, I forget about before that. And you alluded, Dr. Kimball, to some of the political issues. One of my chief frustrations is that for the last 2 years, almost verbatim, I have been delivering what you said about the respect of the taxpayer, and a little bit of what you've said, and what you have implied. You are probably the most stellar staff, policy, and procedure in the state. And I want to know why I am the only one in conservative circles who is saying that, because I'm getting real tired, guys. I've got another life I want to live. I cannot laud you high enough. And I am here to say one of the reasons I'm by myself is because you're almost done too good a job. We are no longer blessed with watching your staff attacked at budget meetings, something I consider a positive move. But the downside of that is that there is an entire ethos of other meetings that you are not in. I am. There is a good deal of what you're doing that you might be able to offer were you to not sit at a podium, but to listen and filter out all the malarkey like they are 2-year-olds and get out what really is the problem. I wanted to point out that at the last budget session, I was obnoxious and went to all 3 of them. And among the consistent public meeting issues that the budget doesn't show and can't show by law is that the law of diminishing returns is something many of us looked at. Do we need Redmond, Horace Mann to be the top in the state, or could it be second? What are the resources? What are the costs? I happen to know from personal experience that we also have an incredibly talented and careful special services. I was paying $60,000 a year for what you are doing now, I'll bet, with 7 staff and consultants that you're paying close. When you talk about monies coming from special services, not everyone in the tax-paying community looks at that as a benefit. You might build new language to reflect that sensitivity, because I know you have it. The problem that we faced was, could we cut some special services? And could we maybe increase class size? And then you made the statements about, oh good, do that and we lose, you said it, 120. Now, the elephant in the room became, we all knew that we would lose the most talented and imaginative teachers in 1st, 2nd, and 3rd grade because of the RIF system. And so everybody knew that we had to mark down low class size. That elephant in the room has lots of the community past the point of rational thought. But they literally see, and I listened to a public official almost verbatim state in a meeting last month, it is as though the WEA and the sheriffs own our homes, own our incomes, and they want more. We don't own our house. It may be paid for, but the taxes, your sensitivity is getting lost because there's no one listening, looking for relationships with the most rational of the folks that are pissed. And I'm tired of being alone. You are so good. And there is a feeling in that community that the board is simply here to get you what they can. I don't know that that's true. I've never seen that. But the board isn't listening to the people that are out in the community wondering, I have cancer. I'm a realtor. I don't qualify for any benefits. And the people in my office may cut off their dollars that they're giving me so that I can get treatment. I can keep, that is, for every anecdote about a secretary who is losing income, I can talk to you about self-employeds. And so I know that you're sensitive, and I know that you care, but the rest of the community needs to be reminded every year. One of the reasons I'm here also is that I am tired of being the only person with my husband who remembers the commitments that Dr. Kimball made and that Superintendent Fogert made, their commitments on the Capitol building program, about the technology, how it would work, what it would cost, the savings. Well, we've got a whole new community every couple of years. We need communication. Promises made, promises kept, built into your standard communication. Because there's a whole movement of people who want to see a paradigm change. Well, we've got a nucleus for the best of what this state can do. Stop keeping it a secret. Stop talking to people that you only want to hear. You can discover what I have in the last 20 years. The conservative community is made up of very noisy people who have wonderful spouses that support liberal and school causes. They are, the best kept secret is that they are outstanding, caring individuals who just don't have the communication skills to bridge. You're supposed to. You're so good. Please come out to events that will make you uncomfortable. Wear a name tag and listen and formulate good ideas that could be used to bridge the mess we have in this state. I don't want to see this district damaged by the mess that is building in our legislature and in our community. And I'm very proud to be part of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. Some good points about communication. Thank you very much. Is there anyone else that would like to come forward to speak about our budget? I don't see anybody coming up to the podium, so I will now close the public hearing and ask Barbara if you could come and let us know what you've heard from the public and our other venues, the web, by phone, email.
Yes, after our June board meeting, after the presentation, the budget was posted on the web and made available to the public, and we received 2 requests from reporters for copies of the budget, and the reporters followed up with additional questions, and we have received no other comments or emails from the public with questions or comments. And I do want to remind the board that the budget they are adopting tonight is the official F-195 budget. That is the official budget that's being adopted. So.
And we always thank you for giving us one that makes a little more sense and easier to read than this particular one that they require.
And I do, for those of you in the audience, I do have other copies of the budget available next to the agendas. So.
Okay. Board, would someone like to make a motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
Okay. Chris moved and Ravi second. Any discussion or questions or comments from board members before you take a vote? I just want to thank your department again. This is not easy. We were fortunate to be able to not have to make the cuts this year that we had thought might be there to do. We are all anticipating next year being not so good, and so we're already beginning to think about how that's going to happen, and involving public again when we get to that point, if we have to, when the legislature meets in the spring or in January. So we will be asking folks out there to keep their eyes and ears open and be prepared to help us out again. And we'd prefer not to be in that situation next year, but it's nice not to be there this year. So any other thoughts?
Well, I was just going to maybe amplify some things I started to talk about earlier, and that is education is, of course, our mission in this community, but one of the kind of byproducts of the fact that we exist is the impact, the positive impact that we make on the economy. And, of course, we are in tough economic times. Both in the near term and the long term, our impact is strong. Obviously, when we educate children to their full potential and young adults to their full potential, we're helping to build our human capital for the future. But in the near term, in terms of the economic impact that our staff and the purchasing and the other things, the other activities that the district is involved in have a positive impact on the economy, on the local economy. And the bonds that were just sold this evening, those support construction, which provides jobs. And so we need to continue, and I think Ms. Hood is correct as far as a number of the impacts that we have and the stories that we need to tell, is that this district has a positive impact on the economy in this community. We employ people, we spend dollars in construction, we spend dollars in supplies, and if we weren't here as one of the largest employers, there would be a very adverse impact on the economy of this community. So I think that's something we need to continue to remind folks and continue, of course, to demonstrate our stewardship of the public money that we've been entrusted to use.
Okay, anyone else? If not, all those in favor, please, of approving the 2010-11 budget, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We have a budget.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, Jackie, is
19.
under tab 19, Resolution 2064. As you know, each year we have the opportunity under RCW 28A.320 to do a capital fund transfer to specifically support the purchase of instructional materials. As a point of clarification, this fund transfer is a result of this law, which says that when there are interest earnings on capital, so this does not touch the capital fund itself, but these are interest earnings on capital, that the law allows us to use those interest earnings, again, specifically for instructional supplies, such as textbooks and other instructional materials equipment. We ask each year for the board to approve the transfer of a portion of those interest earnings for this purpose. In this instance, we're asking for the transfer of $800,000 from our capital interest earnings in order to be applied into the general fund, which would be used for instructional materials.
I'll move approval.
Second.
Have a motion and second. Any comments, questions?
This can go on the consent agenda next year as far as I'm concerned.
Okay, so noted. We will put it on the consent agenda next year. Thank you.
I agree.
have to vote.
Yes, I know. Any other comments or questions? But again, this is just another one of those due diligence and paying attention to and using our resources to the best that we can. And
We do, just a question as it relates to that, we do a similar process for technology, and that has not come up yet. Is that right, Barbara? We still have that yet to do?
That one's a little newer.
So my question is, should we put that in the consent agenda
That one's
this
not
year?
ringing a bell, but probably.
You're talking about the transfer we have to make
Yes.
for, that is actually not done on a separate resolution. It's done as part of the budget process. So as part of you adopting the budget, you adopt that, you approve that transfer.
Thank you, Barbara.
okay, great. All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, Motion carried. Now we're into some board work here in our first reading and tab 20, and I just kind of want to set the scene for those that are here in the audience. Our policy governance is divided into several different categories and pieces. We have governing policy, we have board and superintendent relations, we have our executive limits, and we have our ends results. In conversation over the last year or so, we've had a request amongst board members that we look at our ELs and clean them up a little bit with language, not intent. So basically, this is kind of housekeeping work of changing some wording to make it clearer, getting rid of double negatives, and again, not changing any of the intent of any of the ELs at this time. With that said, other things that are in here, we have a monitoring frequency as part of each of these. We have in the change would remove specific months because from year to year we don't necessarily have the calendar always the same. So it's annually. It doesn't mean we have to do it every February, but we do it annually. So that'll change. And also just we had compiled several over the years, and so just cleaning up the sequencing. So as I said, this is pretty much a housekeeping piece. That said, we have had a little bit of a discussion of intent of ELs in that their purpose is to set parameters. And wanting to make sure if we change language from shall nots and shall not fails to just shall, are we indeed keeping in that intent? And I will ask board members to comment at that point in time on the general piece, if that's the direction we want to take. And then there are a few that were more extensive in that they were more paragraphy that I would like to just address. But I want to get on with this agreement. Are we changing all shall nots and shall not fails to shall?
So the question really is, what we were sent and have in front of us changed the introductory paragraph,
Right.
but not the
But
rest of it.
not the
And I think
accordingly to.
Robbie's going to make a proposal to change both.
Correct.
Right.
And when we get down to it, then what I did, and I didn't have time to send this to anybody, I found a few times where when you were doing that, I thought the meaning wasn't real clear.
Okay.
And I don't want to spend time on that because if we're going to have to come back to these next week anyway, or next whatever, I'll just hand them to you to see.
Okay, well, the intent would be is depending on, because the change that Robbie is asking, or will ask, is asking, is to change, let me do this in an example, just because I'm having everybody in the audience totally confused. These ELs are set up with a global paragraph that describes what the executive limitation is. And then below that, there's a list of numbered or bulleted items that are more specific of what those mean. In the global paragraph, the changes currently is in front of all of us, removed all the not fails and made everything a shall, and left under the accordinglys shall not fail to. So it would say under communication and counsel to the board with respect to providing information and counsel to the board, the CEO shall give the board as much information as necessary to allow board members to be adequately informed. Accordingly, the CEO shall not fail to, and then they're numbered and would say fail to submit monitoring data, would submit monitoring data, would advise the board on trends, et cetera, and so forth. So those are all in the positive statement. The request has been to, instead of saying accordingly the CEO shall not fail to say the CEO shall, and then again go back into the numbering. It is a semantics thing. The intent of what we're getting at is really the same.
It is for the most part, but I did find that on occasion you do need to do some wordsmithing.
Okay, and
because
that's important to
the
have.
meaning does start to
Yeah, I don't know
change
if this is fully
subtly.
baked or not.
Yeah, and I think that's the important piece, because the intent, again, is not to change what the content is and the meaning of what we're doing. So those would be important to do. So what we need to do is initially make the agreement, do we want to make all the shall not fails to shalls? And if that's the direction we want to go, we can go through the document and put that change in, and then we need to pick up these other little pieces that we have about language.
Right. I'm in favor of changing the shall not fails, fail tos to shalls, just for
Is
simplicity.
anybody opposed to that idea? Let's go that way.
So can I introduce
Yes.
the other part of the conversation?
Yes.
So I think that, I think since we adopted policy governance, it's been a bit of a dilemma for us, because on the one hand, the notion of policy governance is to set a parameter for the superintendent, and yet when you do the double negative language, it turns out to be a directive anyway. So it's confusing, and most certainly, if board members are the stewards of the public and the public can't understand it, then it's a little bit of a non-starter from my perspective. The however is that as we've written the ELs, there are lots and lots and lots of directives. It is not really a parameter. And so I'm comfortable with moving to a shall language set. If we also agree that what we are going to do as an administration is we're going to cull through the ELs and identify the directives that we frankly think are beyond a parameter. And then the board can say, this is something we absolutely are going to direct you to do because ... or no, this is really beyond a parameter and we're comfortable with deleting that. And we'd like to do that work to go back and cull through those, because if you look at this, this is essentially a textbook of directives that I'm being given suddenly, all of which have some rhyme or reason to them, but it is a textbook of directives if we...
I thought we already agreed at the retreat that you were going to propose which ELs to cut if you so desired.
Well, when we change the language, I have a higher level of motivation to do
Yeah,
it.
because it does
Okay.
change it changes the perspective on them when you change them from the shall do blah, blah, blah versus shall not fail to.
To me, it's
I don't think
identical,
so.
just
I think that's just a
different wording.
religious statement from the policy governance kooks.
But I think it's not a bad idea. We've had policy governance and the ELs in place for close to 9 years.
Yeah.
And probably it's not a bad time, and our end results are becoming more robust. These were really important in the initial 5 years when we had very little end results, and this is what we had to see progress in student achievement. Were based on what we got in reporting from the ELs. And that's shifting, and we've shifted over
Shifting.
time.
I think it hasn't shifted yet, but it's shifting.
It's shifting.
Yes.
Shifting. I didn't say gone.
Right.
So I will
So
make
the balance has shifted where we are not spending on each EL a half an hour to 45 minutes at every board meeting going over one EL, which is what we did originally. So
I will make a proposal.
Okay.
Or a motion or whatever. I would make a motion that the ELs be redrafted to eliminate the double negatives with shall directive, but before we look at them again, have, as part of that rewrite, get the administration's input on the specifics. So we're not rewriting them and then rewriting them again. I'd really like to only look at them
This
one
one
more
is
time.
a lot easier than.
Yeah.
than-
I guess
second that
my
approach.
thinking is that I'd like to get the language piece done so they're a nice, clean document, and then have the opportunity for them to do the work and either bring it to us before a retreat or spend a bit of time on this conversation
Yeah.
Okay.
in a retreat.
I'll withdraw my motion.
That's okay.
I'm not tied to it.
I appreciate the context of having shall not fail to is a reminder of policy governance. It's one of those grammatical gymnastics things that just keeps reminding you, oh yeah, we're setting parameters, we're not being directive. I would prefer to put in a preamble on these that states that the intent here is broadly that these be parameters, non-directives, than to have things that, I mean, honestly, we're an educational organization. Your average English teacher does not like double negatives. So shall not fail to occurring recurrently, it's just awkward.
Well, maybe that would be an appropriate thing is at the beginning of this chapter of ELs, is that we have a statement of what the intent and purpose of ELs. It may not be a bad idea then to have one before the GPs and the VCRs too, just to basically, anybody looking at it, the public could look at that and say, this is why this is there and this is what they use it
I'd
for.
rather do that, though, at the time when we
Yes.
take a look at the.
Yes, oh, yeah,
look,
yeah.
Yeah, not tonight.
Some time to draft that. I
Sure,
think
whether I understand that perspective, I'm not sure that, like, I'm 100% on the same page. I do agree that these are directives, though, and
Yeah.
we might as well say them that way. Then if we want to, like, come to agreement on whether we should have any directives or not, like, I think that's the time that we potentially cut some of these and actually add explicit language if we agree that we're not going to have directives in here.
Well, and part of the problem that we're dealing with is, when Carver developed, policy governance, I don't know that he necessarily had public policymaking,
That's right.
the whole process in mind. And so there's a lot of things that the legislature does, and now increasingly Washington, D.C. does, that are directive, and there's no getting around it. And so in terms of our little turf in this whole world of federal and state policymaking, we might be able to carve out a little bit of an area where the executive, that we're only trying to limit him rather than direct him, but it's going to be difficult. It's not going to be neat and tidy. And so I think we're all aware of that, but I think it's going to be a challenge.
And I think it makes it for a good policy governance conversation that we are probably overdue for having. So what I'm hearing is we will do the shalls throughout, so that one change will be made. The other thing is that Nancy has a few that she has some questions about as far as meaning. And we have a couple of changes from Robbie that I think do a better job on the couple paragraphs under EL 5 and 6, and also 11, because those languages are all pretty similar. It's the ones that were safe, ethical,
Right.
et cetera. So if everyone's comfortable with that, we could put that language in those places for everyone to see. And other than that, and then Nancy's going to give me hers. Why don't we have me then go through, make all the shalls, and put in Robbie's comments for those paragraphs, and we can look at the other ones that you might have.
But on the changes that I made, like, to those paragraphs, I'll call out the most, like, the part that actually changes the meaning slightly, just, to make sure we all agree. Like, I removed the parts about not disruptive, because I just think that's not possible that you could never disrupt any students or parent. Whenever we do a boundary change, it's disruptive, right? It just seems impossible.
And we have an EL that talks about disruption to the student in one of the bullets.
Right.
In it, 7 or one of those has it in it.
Okay. All right, great. I just wanted to call that out.
My other just minor thing is everything should be capitalized.
Oh, okay.
Either capitalize it or don't capitalize it, but
Yeah.
the rest is capitalized.
But if I hear correctly, this is direction we're talking about tonight, but the final approval will come at another point.
Correct. I think what we'll need to do is have this come back out and have a second reading that's actually a second reading, and then since this is not time-driven, then have it go into consent after that. I think we need to have the document come out one more time where everybody sees all these new pieces in their proper places, so that, and catch any that I've missed, or then have any other question that have come up.
Yeah.
Okay, does that seem reasonable to everybody?
So that's on the ELs. Are we going to talk about the GP separately?
Yes, because they're in a different section.
So we don't need to make a moat.
No, we're not approving
or a
anything
motion.
tonight. We're basically,
Can I also ask?
Thank you, Jackie,
what-
because that's a lot of work. It's just kind of a little tedious.
Yep. I'd also like to know the board's preference in terms of looking at these. Is it better for the board for us to cull through them and bring them to a retreat, Or is it better, as we just simply monitor them anyway, go ahead and say, we're doing this monitoring report, and while we're on it, let's talk about this one, and here are the things that we as the administration would recommend that we think about as it relates to, what's the
I
preference?
prefer to do them all together,
I
so
would
you
too,
can sort of
'cause
see the whole thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm with Ronnie.
Notice, okay, we're cutting this one, this one, this one, and this one. Is that really, is that a good thing?
And I think I'd like to do it.
mention during
Yeah.
the monitoring report.
Yeah. I think I'd like to not do it with the report in front of me, because I think the report part takes me away from what I'm reading. Because as I've read these now, I think about what the statements are without the data and the information with it. And I think may make it easier for us to
I
clean them
think
up.
I also get a different, like, when you're looking at one, it's like that seems to be the one thing that matters, right? Like,
Yeah.
when you look at 17 of them, you're like, geez, I've got 17 of these.
Right.
Any individual one, it's,
I find myself disagreeing with Ravi.
it's strange. You must be wrong. Go on.
But I think that the perspective of having the big picture, of reviewing them all in toto, is valuable. I agree. But when we're in the nuts and bolts of one of these, I think that's the time to be rewriting it. So I really do think we should have the conversation around, if we're going to make edits, if we think this thing's too direct, if we want to delete, edit, whatever. We should do that at the time that we're in the thick of it, and then review it at the end of the year and say, in the big picture, did that fit?
I thought we were talking about cutting them, though. Like, if we're talking about removing an EL, right? Like,
Yeah,
I mean, if we're talking about minor wording changes, then I'm with you. But if we're talking about, like, should we remove the limitation around financial administration or something, right? Like, I think that's sort of a big discussion that I'd like to tackle holistically. I mean, I guess if he raises it when we're doing the EL, I'm okay with that. It's not like I don't want to hear it. I just don't want to decide on like kind of a one-off basis.
Well, and as an example is the way that a number of these have been written. The ones that we put in non-compliance because they're impossible to ever then, I mean, those are a problem, frankly. I mean, the way that policy governance is designed is that it is a parameter, and I'm living within the parameter or I'm not. But we've written a bunch of these, so they're in non-compliance, and frankly, if I'm in non-compliance on a number of these, you should be considering firing me. And I don't think that's the case today.
No.
And so those right out of the chute should be reconsidered for changes because they're impossible to adhere to.
If they're uncompliant.
So then the question becomes, well, this one's okay to not be in compliance, but this one's not. And I mean, it really is kind of a screwy system.
Yeah.
Well, that's a really bigger discussion, and we hashed it out with Linda and what's his name?
Yeah, Dawson and
And we didn't
name?
really, as far as
Quinn.
I'm concerned, come to a good resolution because it is a difficult thing to resolve. The truth is, if you were 100% in all of these things, we'd be graduating 100% of our kids and sending them to Harvard.
But that's not an EL. See, that's the difference.
Right, I understand that. But 100% doesn't always happen. So I think it's worth discussing, but it's something that's going to take a bigger discussion. It's going to me, it's a retreat type discussion. Although I agree partially with Chris also that while we're doing the ELs is also a good time. So I can go both ways. And it might be good to do a little, to do that and to have the big picture discussion at the retreat.
And I do like the idea of coming up with a page that, before all of them, that's explanatory, because these are on our website. And if someone is looking at what our board does and they go to EL1, it's like, okay, well, what are these things? And to have some kind of
Well, and is there another way? I mean, just because we've used Carver's policy governance, knowing all along that it wasn't tightly fitted into a public agency with a public board with public responsibilities, it doesn't mean we can't tweak it more ourselves, and that we're locked into this process now. I think we've owned it long enough that
it's
we
ours.
can make some changes.
So I'd like to suggest
could maybe call them
that
something
we,
else. They may not have to be executive
book.
limitations. I mean, seriously. We changed the
In your free
ends to
time,
end
Chip, you
results.
can write the book.
Yeah, yeah, in your free time.
So I'd like to suggest that we do this at the March retreat when we have some
Yeah.
committed time and.
Yeah.
and,
Good.
But if
get
you
after
also, if in doing this, think of something that better reflects what it is.
Yeah.
We can look
Okay.
at that too. I mean, if they're not really limitations but are something else, then maybe that's what we should be working on. Okay, that takes care of the ELs. Now, tab 21 are the GPs, and they basically, which are governance policy of how we operate as a board, these were just changing the dates to annual. So I think these can come back on the consent agenda at our September meeting without a problem, since nothing else was changed. And the same under tab 22 are our BCRs, which are our board and CEO relations. And again, that's and the more I think about this, having something before just let people have that written for them would be good. Just 3 of them, and again, they needed to be updated as far as the annual versus a specific month. So I think those were in pretty good shape. Thank you all. It's taken me a while to sit down and say, okay, I'm going to do it. So we're slogging along.
I'm
All right.
surprised we still have an audience left, frankly, after this.
It's the only time of year that I really had time to just sit down in front of my computer when the sun wasn't out. All right, we are at tab, where are we, 23.
23, staff treatment.
Now we're on to you again.
Okay.
The ELs. Speaking of, now we monitor them.
EL 11 is under tab number 23, and as is typically the case, we look at those areas that are a partial compliance or non-compliance. In this case, that is number 4. Ravi did pose a couple of questions that we can address. One of the things I think that is important around this EL has been of particular interest because it relates to quality of instruction and quality of teaching as reflected in our PGE system. This is the first year that we've actually been able to pull out PGE data. Is this the one? 11? Is that right? Yes?
Yes,
Yes, okay. Just wanted to make, yeah, there it is. Sorry, I lost my pages. So this is the first year that through the PGE system, we've actually been able to pull out the data. So I think we have made good progress in that area where you can now see the performance of teachers level 1, year 1. We're still working on consistency of evaluation. We're still working on understanding that data, but we have had more teachers on plans of improvement than we've historically had, which I think is an indicator of being more diligent around our evaluation system. And
What was the number total?
it was 13 total.
More than,
And I think that's quite a bit more than it has been in the past. And so we're making progress in that area. One of the questions that Ravi asked was knowing who our top staff are, or that when people leave, we know whether there's something we could have or should have done to prevent it. And both of those are issues. We do have exit interviews, but we don't have a good mechanism for similarly collecting that exit interview data. Pat Feller-Fung, who is our director of HR, does review any exit interview information we do get. And but the however is that often people who leave who may not be satisfied don't necessarily provide exit interview data, so it's not necessarily reliable, good data for us at this point. We did adopt the K-12 Insight program this last year. I think that you received a brief about that, which is essentially a surveying tool that we can use, an electronic surveying tool. It's better and more sophisticated than Zoomerang, which we've used for a lot of the work in the past. And Pat and Catherine are working with them in order to get after some of these questions. But I agree it is an issue around, again, exit interviews as well as knowing who our top staff are. So something we agree with and we're working on.
I have just a minor question about, with the surveys, as I'm looking at these, the boxes and the results that you're reporting. And about 90% of them, it was a 5-point scale, so the percentage we're seeing is the top 2.
Yes.
And then when we get to the ones that are on the 4-point, the number drops off the face of the earth from an 80% down to 40% because it just reported the top number. I got confused in what I was reading, and I had to go back and recheck that, and I was like, okay, is there a reason we just don't do everything as a 5-point?
Do you know the answer to that, Catherine or Janine?
And, oh, okay. It doesn't look as good until you look at the mean. But I kept thinking, why did it go from 80% in this everything seems going well, and now only 43% are in this one?
We also looked at that because I raised that same question, Jackie. And we did look at going back and doing the top 2 box. They're still really not comparative because you're looking at sort of 50% of the distribution instead of 2/3 of, the top 2 out of 5 is different than the top 2 out of 4, obviously. The way the question is asked is a little bit different. So when you see a 4-point scale, it's asked as like always, usually, sometimes, never.
Okay.
And the other ones are more on a Likert scale of level of agreement. So that's sort of the genesis of behind why there's a different scale. Some questions tend to lend themselves better to a response of always, sometimes, usually, or never. But that's been the kind of the historical trend of why those are different.
Okay. It just was kind of as you're rolling along and all these numbers look good, and then you go 43 and go, what?
Yeah.
I did the exact same thing.
I had a similar problem, and I had a problem reading the charts, and I don't know if you can come up with a way. When you lump the top 2 together, it kind of, to me, distorts a little bit what people are actually saying. I know I hate to kill paper, but I think just seeing the actual results would probably be a little easier to interpret. I had to spend a bit of time looking at these and then go, yeah, I don't really know for sure what that's saying. And then those 2 where, on page 7, where it says the input I provide the district is valued, those percentages are pretty low. That's not very good evidence. So,
But that was an always, and the next would be always sometimes? Is that the next box?
Well,
usually.
I think we need a little, more explanation for that one, and there was,
There's
I
one more.
marked them both, there were 2 of them.
Yeah.
Because that doesn't look very good, and I think it's not telling the whole story, or if it is telling the story, then it's something that needs to be addressed. Does that make sense?
So is that consistent with the whole board that you want it broken out more specifically so that, and we'll start producing those reports differently?
Sorry, you're talking about this table?
Well, I'm talking about,
It was on
there's
5.
two issues. One is, there are the tables that lump the top 2 together, strongly agree and agree. And to me, that somewhat doesn't give me the type of picture that I'd want. I'd rather see all of it broken out instead of the summary. And then when you take those 2 charts, one on page 5 and one on page 7, both of which are really, important questions. On page 5, the schools maintain an open and responsive organization culture. Always is, not particularly high considering where we normally are with the type of input and support we have. And so and then on page 7, the input I provide the district is valued. Those are disturbing, except that I think we're only seeing part of the picture.
So we can provide you the full fulcrum of the answers, so in each of the response categories. I do think part of it is always is a strong word for some people, so how they interpret the word versus strongly agree is a little bit more kind of open to people's interpretation. So.
And some people will never mark a box that says always.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we can provide the background data.
No matter what.
And the point the real concern is if that's how our staff really felt, then we would have concerns that needed to be addressed. So it's hard to explain, but yeah, I don't feel like we're getting the whole picture.
Yeah, and I think also that what's hard around things like that is, there was a specific example. Catherine had a survey done recently, our post bond data, and she reported back the data. And then what she said was, and by the way, that agency said this was the highest data they've ever seen of anybody in this kind of instance. So you could look at this and say, in the absolute, oh, I'm really worried about this. Or we could say, when you compare it to how any employee group feels about their employer as it relates to this in this instance, it's actually pretty good. I mean, it's hard to know what the barometer is.
Sure.
And so I agree that we need to split it out so you can see the data more deliberately about where people land in each of the categories. But I want to be careful about jumping to conclusions about what it tells us unless we really understand what it is we want and what people are saying to us.
Well, that needs to be addressed in the narrative, and
Sure.
I may have been too tired, but I didn't see it addressed in the narrative.
Okay.
And then on the last chart, on page 25, there's a, and I don't think, again, that this is unexpected, but there is a big difference between where certified staff are, and I'm not sure why we only have certified, certified, sorry. I utilize all available instructional time by carefully planning lessons and limiting interpretations. That is, as you would expect, quite high. You ask parents apparently the same question, and the percent agreement drops significantly, which I don't think is unexpected, but I don't really see a narrative that addresses that.
Why do we ask parents that question?
Well, I think that we asked parents that question because it provides a sense of reality, frankly. Teachers have their own
Different realities.
It's two different realities. I mean, I think this actually helps us talk about what parents' view versus teachers' view. It's not necessarily something that I'm not going to do an action plan to improve this score unless you say that this is a problem for you, but it does help me have hard conversations with staffs around their parent perception versus the reality.
But I'm hoping the question that went to the parents isn't phrased exactly this way, because it sounds like you're asking, it's a different question
Yeah,
that
it
was
is a
asked.
different question. So it's just been mismarked on there. It's more schools or my teacher's classroom. We'll get that fixed. I think the question is phrased appropriately for parents.
Well, and what I would hope to see in the narrative is how you are using that data or something to that effect. Because just on its face value, like you said, it doesn't tell us the whole picture. I don't think I'm asking for an action plan. I'm asking that, how this data is being used or interpreted.
Okay.
Oh, you want them to say, here's the data, this is what I think it means.
Some narrative about, so I'm not just going on my assumptions.
Right.
Make many assumptions.
Yeah.
Well, and I just want to caution us once again, so now the territory that we're diving into is one little nit inside of an EL.
But then why have this table? Like, if we have a table maybe the answer is the table shouldn't be here, right? But, like, the input I provide the district is valued 43%. If you look at that and you're troubled, on the one hand, it makes sense to be troubled. On the other hand, as you say, maybe that's just life, right? Which is why I didn't raise it too, because I figured it's probably just life, right? But then, right, if we're just going to guess about that, then, why did we have this information?
And the reason why I brought that up, and again, I think this has worked for the future, so I'm not contesting it here because we've been working in this format for a while, is if you look at what that's under, it's failed to develop an evaluation system that guides and relates skill development and performance. So all of a sudden now we're talking about instructional time as it relates to whether or not we have an evaluation system. I mean, it's,
Yeah.
Yeah, I
there's
see.
a disconnect
enough, yeah.
for me.
Well, and I guess this brings to me a question that I've had. We do lots of surveys pretty regularly of the community, and maybe what we ought to look at is a different way of reporting the surveys to the board rather than trying to embed them in some of the ELs. That
we've
you
been
do
down that road
a,
before, haven't we?
you know, you do a, here's what we asked and here's the results, similar to what you did with the bond one. And that way we kind of know what, especially the ones from the public, what the public is saying on a pretty regular basis, and then figure out how you want to report to us about staff.
Right.
And staff satisfaction. But to me, these are more satisfaction surveys that we're talking about.
Right, and it could be, as we look at the ELs more deliberately, I mean, there could be an EL specifically that says, if we're going to go with the shall language, that the superintendent shall survey staff and community. That's it. And then we provide that information. I think part of the reason why the design is, I think that there were a number of sub-bulleted ELs that are difficult to find evidence for other than the survey data.
Yeah.
And so we took all that survey data, blew it apart
Yeah.
in order to provide that evidence, because otherwise we don't got nothing. And then we end up with this problem of there's bits and pieces of it spread throughout the EL infrastructure. So.
And to me, I think if you have 10 questions that you ask staff every year and get a survey on, if you just reported on it, and we saw,
Yeah.
a 2 or 3 year comparison, and just had that explain, our staff is happy, and we're happy that they're happy, or we're worried in this area, and what you're going to do about it makes more sense than
think that
a
has
little
other
bit here and
problems,
a
though.
little bit over here.
Now we're having one sweeping discussion about potentially everything in the organization, right? I mean,
Yeah. Well, and I think that you guys
That could be
you guys need to think about that as to how you want to architect that conversation. It seems to me that what this keeps pointing to, both in how we report it, how the language is used, how the ELs are architected, is that it appears that we may, I'm not even going to say do, but we may have some architectural issues that we probably need to talk about. And so we'll keep building on these, have that architectural conversation at the retreat, and kind of step back from it and say, is this working for us? What's working, what's not working? What do you as a board really expect? What do I as the superintendent need? And how do we work that together to create a system that's going to give you the level of accountability that you think you need from me, and me the level of latitude I need in order to get the organization to perform, and then we move forward from there.
And I'm actually, with my comments about survey, I was not thinking that this was a huge major discussion. It could be sent to the board in a board brief or done as a superintendent's report, where the superintendent said, we've done this survey, and I don't think it hurts the public
Right.
to hear that you've got a staff that's happy.
Right.
Or areas that are of concern that you're working on,
Right.
and they don't need to be us sitting here, nitpicking with them unless we have an issue.
I'm curious about this because I might have blinked, but were we going to give them the chance to talk through the ones that weren't in compliance in EL 11? Because we've launched into some of them, and there are 2 in there
Yes.
that aren't in compliance.
Yes. So,
There's only 4.
Thank you.
One.
Okay.
Oh, there's 2.
So the one that is not in compliance is .4. Let me get to the back.
Are there 4? Wait.
4's in partial, I
Is
think.
in partial. So 4 is in partial
Page 12.
compliance.
And there's-
Trying to remember how we.
Yeah, in here. Oh, there it is, page 25.
Well, 25, but it starts back on page 12.
Yeah.
For some reason, there's 2
It's
4s.
very long.
Oh,
is that
okay, it's
what
all
happened?
part of, all part of 4.
Those are developed, but yeah. it's all
Yes,
part of-
so I think that the partial compliance in 11.4 has primarily to do with the modifications to the PGE system, where we're working towards, but we haven't gotten the data system to the point where we're satisfied quite yet and where it fully meets this, I believe.
Okay.
Now, there was a question that Ravi asked around 11.4 that I think is important to also bring up. I'm going to ask Tracy to talk about this for a moment, and that is when Teachers who are in level 2 who are not proficient, what happens to them? And Tracy, do you know what I'm talking about? Okay. Because I want to talk specifically about this 4-tiered system, which is in the law that all districts are going to have to go to eventually, and we have some very specific practice around it, which causes the numbers to do funny things, which is what Ravi picked up on. So, Tracy, would you just talk about what happens when a teacher who's on level 2, what happens to them and why that impacts the numbers?
Sure. So I'll just start with how you get to level 2. When a new teacher's hired into our district, they start on level 1, year 1, and they have 4 years to progress to proficient or distinguished in all components of all domains by the end of their 4th year. If that's the case, then they move to level 2. So the assumption is if you're on level 2, your evaluator has deemed you proficient or distinguished in all components of all domains. There's an annual process whereby the evaluator, in the summary evaluation, really completes an assurance that that is still accurate, that the teacher's remaining proficient or distinguished in all components of all domains. That's what is required to remain on level 2. If a teacher is not meeting those standards, then the evaluator goes through a process and moves the teacher back to level 1, year 4, where they stay and they're put on a plan of improvement with the hope that they're going to improve and then move on to level 2. So the reason why we don't have, and I'll speak to the ones that we do, typically why we don't have anyone who's unsatisfactory or basic in level 2 is because you wouldn't be on level 2 if that were the case. However, because we do have principals at the end of the year raising some potential concerns with teachers, they've marked in cases where they felt that the teacher really isn't meeting the standard to level 2. And the evaluator will revisit that with the teacher in the fall, go through the process of moving them back to level 1, year 4, and working on their areas of deficiency.
So you're immediately moved back to level, like if you're level 2 and you're at basic and something,
Yep.
then you would show up in level 1 statistics?
That's correct. Now, we do have, when you look at the data for level 2, you've got some basics showing up. The reason that is, that means in the spring, the evaluator acknowledged those areas that are less than proficient, and will be working with that teacher in the fall and formally moving them back to level 1 and placing the teacher on a plan of improvement.
So they show up in the year that they were level 2 and were reviewed as basic, they show up in the level 2 statistics. The year after that, they wind up back in level 1, year 4?
Correct.
And that's
So
why level
the-
1, year 4 looks like it's got
That's
so
correct,
hard.
because really every teacher who's on a plan of improvement
Is in level
on
1-4.
Level
Okay.
1, year 4.
So does that, I had the same curiosity, but I think that answers the question for me. Do you?
It explains.
Yeah, I think I'm not quite getting it. So if you're level 2, year 1, and you're basic, like everyone who's basic in that table, that's in the spring, and if in the fall they're still.
Well, so this is data pulled from this past spring. So if I'm a principal and I'm completing the summary evaluation for these teachers, and I'm acknowledging that, you know, really based on all of my informal observations and interactions with this teacher, I really can't, in good faith, say that this teacher is proficient in or distinguished in all components of all domains. The principals made that acknowledgement in the system, and at the summary conference with the teacher, brought that to the teacher's attention and let the teacher know this means in the fall I'll be scheduling a full formal observation with you, and that can, if at that time I'm still seeing you at this level, we will be moving you back to level 1, year 4, and placing you on a plan of improvement. What we don't want is the principal marking the teacher proficient if they're really not proficient. So you will see, that's why you see some basics show up in level 2. It's those teachers who, that's been brought to their attention, and then the principal will follow up and follow through with that in the fall.
So on level 2s, years 1, 2, 3 don't seem to have a whole lot of basics. But then in year 4, there's a bunch. Is that because year 4 is a routine interview and 1, 2, and 3 are optional, or?
In level 2 for year 1, 2, and 3, there's no full formal observation cycle required. The evaluator is, of course, informally in teachers' classrooms all of the time and conduct for an equivalent of at least 60 minutes a year, but they're not scheduling the full formal cycle where there's a pre-conference and observation and a post-conference. That occurs in level 2, year 4.
Right.
So every 4 years, and
So it's
that's
not just
another
the
built-in
Olympics.
assurance.
Yeah,
Mhm.
okay. Year 4 seems to be tough in both levels, so.
So that's why on the last one, under level 2, year 4, there's people back in basic again. Now, how far back are they going to go? They're already up to level 2, year 4. Are they going to move all the way back to level 1?
That is our contractual process, yes, because essentially all years of level 2 are the same. The system is built so through our induction and mentoring and coaching from the principal, a staff member, a teacher has 4 years to get up to the expectation where you're proficient in all components of all domains. And then the expectation is that you remain and hopefully continue to grow to be distinguished, but you remain at least at the proficient level. And so what our system does is allows principals to hold teachers to that high level, that high standard, and if they're not meeting that standard, then there's a process, of course, and then the teacher is moved back to level 1 and placed on the plan of improvement because their performance is sliding. At one point, they were proficient or distinguished, and now they're back at basic, and so that's someone that we're going to be working with.
So the 13 that were placed on plan of improvement, is that only the teachers that should have been at proficient, or does that also include the new teachers who are not yet proficient or basic?
A new
I'm starting to
teacher.
confuse myself.
Okay, so a teacher who's new to the system and they're level 1, that's what the shaded areas indicate. My first year, by the end of year 1, level 1, the expectation is that I'm at least basic in everything, and I'm proficient in my domain of focus, which for level 1, year 1, is classroom environment. So if you look on page 15.
So those that in the shaded area, those are your areas of concern?
Correct. So those are the instances that group of teachers is performing less than expected for their year and level. Those teachers are not going on a plan of improvement unless the overall domain has been, they've been marked basic or unsatisfactory. So teacher will, with the evaluator, will set growth goals for the areas if it's just like one particular component within the domain that is not yet proficient. The evaluator and the teacher will set a growth goal for the next year. Essentially, the teacher has 4 years to show that they're proficient in all components of all domains, and then they're moved to level 2.
And the numbers that we're seeing here, this is new, so this isn't criticism, this is just asking from a slightly different presentation. At each year, if there was some way to see how many total teachers this represented, because if you look at level 1, year 4, 3A through 3E, we see 10, 10, 10, 10, 7. Those 10, I don't think represent 40 independent teachers.
Correct. So
Total
you
on
can-
the right, isn't it?
You
Sorry?
can't total down the
Yeah.
column to get its number of instances.
Yeah.
So it could be the same teacher who's showing up as basic in multiple components.
Yes.
Is it possible for us to draw the number of individuals that actually represents?
Yeah, that's just a suggestion.
Okay, I can look into that.
With this, because this is really complex, which I appreciate, but when you say there's 13 on a plan of improvement, how many areas do they have to not be at proficient? Any one of these areas, if after 4 years they're not proficient, they're on a plan of improvement?
Domain, not component. So
Domain. the
Domain's
grouping.
the whole thing. So domain 2. for example. Is that right?
And according to our contract, if I'm a level 2 teacher who's been on level 2, and I've got even a basic or an unsatisfactory in one component of a domain, I need to be moved back to level 1 and placed on a plan of improvement for that component. So the plan of improvement is designed to address the particular component or domain that's not up to standard. And it's a plan of support with the goal to help the teacher grow and improve in that area.
So what that means is that whether it's domain or component, at this point for last year, we had 13 people who had a component level that was in the
Component or domain. So these 13 teachers could represent both level 1 and level 2 teachers. Level 1 teachers can be placed on a plan if they're unsatisfactory in a particular component. So these teachers either began a plan of improvement last year or were continuing on a plan from a previous year.
Did you tell us that this was more teachers that are on a plan of improvement than we've had before?
Yes.
But isn't that because of the system? I mean, we now have in place a system that systemizes this, and we may actually have more teachers on plans of improvement as this is worked on.
I think that as we have more consistency in practice, which is the learning walk discussion we had earlier this evening, as we have more consistency in practice, I think there is a potential that we could have more teachers on plans of improvement over time, yes. I think that we are getting better at evaluating what we consider teachers who are struggling and either improving them or working them out of the system. I think that that's true. And we still have ways to go in that area as well.
Has the determination been made in the contract that how many years you get to have to improve before you agree to leave?
It's not outlined specifically in the contract. It's very situational, and we definitely work collaboratively with our association leadership. Depending on the nature of the issue, sometimes the timeline is shorter, sometimes the timeline is longer.
But let me understand, what's the percentage of teachers that we're talking about that need various kinds of improvement?
So total number of teachers.
Well, we have 1,500
and there's
teachers.
13.
This 13 is less than 1%.
So I'm wondering why we're spending so much time talking about this. I mean, I appreciate the sensitivity
Because I think
of getting
that
the data presented correctly, but
It shows where, in my view, it shows where we're heading. Yes, it isn't a large percentage of our teachers. It never has been. But we're systemizing the system not only to help teachers know what they need to do, but how to evaluate them and how to exit the profession if that's what's necessary after all of this work.
I think one of the things why this is important, and I think the questions are important and appropriate, is that we currently make a claim that the most important and most highly leveraged thing that we do in this business is quality teaching. And the board, I think, needs assurances that we're actually monitoring quality teaching inside of the system. And I think that the claim that I've made is that I think that in Lake Washington School District, we have many, many high-quality teachers, arguably one of the highest quality systems in the country. And as an industry, we have not done a good job, in my mind, of evaluating teaching quality as good as we could, and we're trying to improve that. And this data and creating a consistency of practice and going to a 4-tiered system, all of those things are incrementally helping us ensure that we have high-quality teaching in every classroom every day.
I think it's really impressive, and as this plays out, I think it's going to be a model. And I think it's important because for one bad teacher, that's 25 to 30 kids whose year is
Or
affected.
150 if you're in high
And
school.
it systemizes the training and the supports they need to improve.
Right. And where this, of course, is headed nationally, and there's just no masking where this is going to head, is we will be at a place inside of a decade, in my mind, where teacher performance and student performance will be directly linked. And so we have to be prepared for how do we talk about that in a meaningful way, such that we are holding teachers accountable for whether or not students are achieving, but are also not creating a gotcha for those things that are outside of a teacher's control, such as socioeconomic and mitigating factors at home and enrichment and those kinds of things that we know contribute to a student's overall performance.
Okay. Do we have any other questions or comments? Are we ready
One
to?
final one, and this is
move
tongue
on?
firmly in cheek. Is there a reason that in year one, level one, we focus on Arena 2, and then in year 2 we focus on Arena 3, and then year 3 we do Arena 1? It feels like we're deliberately trying to confuse things.
Our professional growth and evaluation system is based on Charlotte Danielson's framework for teaching, and that's really the order of, it's numbered logically. I believe when we first worked with our association, the agreement was in a teacher's first year, they really typically have the most challenges with classroom environment, classroom management. And while they're working on all areas, that's really the logical entry point. And then for a focus domain, and then bringing on instruction the second year as a focus, it didn't follow the same sequence of how the
It's okay. It's just that
domains are
this
numbered,
is
but,
because
yeah.
someone set up that structure as 1, 2, 3, 4, but we do 2, 3, 1, 4.
Me
I'd
too.
be in favor of renumbering it for us. Anyway, just make it easier.
Okay.
Okay, can I raise a couple of things here?
Okay.
One is the administrative evaluation system. If I understand it correctly, it's sort of based on these kind of 7 sort of areas.
The ISLIC standards, which are state, and I believe they're nationally.
Right.
Yeah.
So I have no objection to those standards, but it seems very natural for administrators to also have specific, goals.
Yeah, and I think as building principals work with their director of school support, and they have areas that they identify in their pre-conference and then their summary conference annually. Central office staff, I think, is less rigorous. All central office staff are evaluated, which was not always the case. But I don't, I'd say most central office staff do not have a pre-conference and a post-conference similar to principals.
Right. So I guess it seems to me like it's pretty natural for both building administrators and the central office to do that, like as part of the evaluation. The start of the year, I guess
Yeah.
it's not an earth-shattering concept, right?
No. And again, I do think that we do a pretty good job with building principles. And we can probably put more rigor into that with central office folks. I know that when I do my evaluations, my summary conference is actually the goals for the next year. I mean, I do one a year, and we talk about what happened, and what happened sets the framework for what's next.
That's right.
And that's how I do it, but we don't have consistent practice across the central office.
It seems, I would suggest doing that consistently, and that should actually be part of the evaluation system. Right?
Yeah, I agree.
I really, really, really like these tables. That we can quibble about the numbers, but to me, this is good progress from where we've been, and I'm very happy to see that because it's very. As you said, it's very important. To me, this is the most important EL, probably. Yeah. I say that not looking at the others right now, but
for today.
I wouldn't always say that, though, when we were talking about one of the others. So I'm really happy to see that.
So I know that I'm not going to throw this one out, and I'm not going to throw the money out one out with Jackie, so
That's exactly
I know
right.
we've got two.
But this one actually could, I mean, you could make a case for throwing this one out if you take the strict view. So I'm interested in that discussion.
Yeah.
Oh, boy.
But
I'm going to have
Robbie and
I'm gonna
I
have
a
my
weekend
pot
by
of-
ourselves.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm going to have a pot of coffee here. I'll send you two to breakfast again and then come back.
that's right.
That may be the better thing to do.
I do think, though, that, like, if you look at the specific numbers, to me, it also, generally speaking, it shows that we have a ways to go, like, in having more teachers, on plans of improvement or whatnot, which I think you've already agreed with that. Anything else on this one? I guess that's all I have on part 4. I have something on part 1, though.
Okay.
which
Part
is,
one.
To me, part 1 is partial compliance, because of the things that you mentioned, that, until we even have some notion of who our top staff are, I think that we're sort of remiss, right? Like, this is, to me, it's not a theoretical point, right? Like, that we even know, like, if you look at the tables, right, that you provided, basically we have a sea of almost entirely at standard teachers, right? And that we can't differentiate more than that, like, and act on that is.
I guess where I would take issue with that is one is really about attracting and attract and retain, and it's really about, do we do a good job of recruiting, and do we do a good job of comping so that they stay? If you look at the language inside of that, that's really what that's about. Mm-hmm. So the fact that we may need to improve on evaluating people out, to me, is not really related to this particular component of the Yale. But argue to the contrary if you.
Part of my argument to the contrary is that we added Part B because of what was in my head, which is, since I'm the one who proposed adding Part B, which involves knowing who are your best people and making sure that you keep them, right? And we don't. I'll give you. Here's an anecdote about this, right? So several years ago, there was a big dust-up at Redmond High, right? And one of our teachers, he left, and he was widely regarded. Right?
I know who you're talking, and I'll make the argument.
I know you know. But,
he wasn't one of our best teachers.
Okay, but I don't know that, right? And you have nothing to show that to me or to tell me how systemic such a problem is, except that our overall turnover rate is not stunningly high. So,
and here's the issue, and that is that within the current environment, even if I knew that he was the best teacher, and there are no tools that we have in order to say, oh, please stay, we're going to pay you $10,000 more money. I mean, we don't have a tool to do that, nor do am I willing to be evaluated, because that's what this is, on a system that we have absolutely no capability of creating a tool to do that. Unless the board has suddenly decided that you want to create an incentive system, other than what we do have is we do have a retain and attract and retain part of our schedule that with a certain amount of tenure, teachers get more money in our school district and therefore are inclined to stay because we're at the top of the schedule.
But it would be ludicrous for, I think, any of us to propose such a thing without even knowing where we are. And all I'm asking for is to know where we are right now. Like, that we don't know, to me, is, it's not catastrophic, but like, it's not.
And I would still make the argument that is evaluative. That is not about recruiting good teachers and keeping them through a good competitive comp system. And we do that by making sure that our comp system is third in our comparables, that we have enough distribution of the resources so that we can keep people at the top of the schedule. I think that we're in compliance, and I think what you're asking is, how do we know who the best are, and how do we know that we're keeping them?
Right.
Well, this is about having a system for making sure that we're keeping our people. I think that we have that in place. I think we're in
You're
compliance.
saying since we basically keep everyone, we must be keeping our best
I would make
teachers.
that argument.
Well, Robbie,
Makes
if you
sense.
look at these specific points under number 1, I think he is meeting these 4 specific points. You're getting into issues that are further on in the EL.
Well, you're talking about defining quality teaching.
Well, attract and hire the most highly qualified and best suited candidates. So
I'm not
there's
arguing
an
with that.
elaborate process for
Yep.
that.
But if you couple it with the evaluation process and the small number of teachers that are on improvement, you have to assume, I would guess, that a large number of what's left are good teachers. And how many are in level 2, in that number of people that are in the level 2 category versus level 1, 4. And in this, and then only having a 7% turnover. So if the evaluation system says that we have good teachers and we are only turning over a small amount, we must have a system there that's keeping them. It's just, they're not in number for you to say we have 10 absolutely great teachers that we're not letting go out the door.
Actually, there's one thing here. 7% sounds like a small number, but it means that the average tenure of a teacher in the district is 14 years. It's not 14 years from here to retirement. So it is something that I think I'm interested in how many we're cycling through in losing the first 5 years versus longer term tenure.
So if you look at, and I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but if you look at, because the first 5-year number is an interesting number for most people in most states and countries, states in the country, because there is by some statistics, as many as 50% of the teachers.
Exactly. I mean, if we're not unusual, I'm not terribly concerned.
We
but I
do
like to know.
track that, and we are highly, highly unusual in that we retain a high number of our teachers in that category, and it's almost specifically, well, it's almost entirely driven by the fact that we have a very rich mentoring program early in the year. So we are very, very strong in that area.
Doesn't that get reported somewhere? Because you
It
report that
is
to us every year.
reported. It is reported somewhere, and it's do you know the number, Tracy, off the top of your head?
I think I've seen it before. It's just
The
not
less
here.
than 5-year turnover rate?
I forgot.
No? Okay.
Anyway,
That's
we're.
our
So frankly, this is an area, again, where we do a really good job of retaining, and if you read in the EL, the majority of our turnover that we know about from our exit interviews is a function of people moving out of the area. So, and again, retaining and nurturing top-quality staff, again, I'm having a hard time understanding if they're rated high and we're losing them. I'm not going to be able to put in a system that's going to change that. So, I think that I am in compliance with that particular part of the EL.
Well, the
I see.
other thing, too, is the 7% turnover number drops when you take out the retirees, if you're looking at what you're talking about. I mean, people, if they're at a point in time that they can retire,
It's 4 to 1 resigned to retired.
well, it
So
says
7% down to
27.
5.5%.
Yeah. But again,
Yeah,
but they're
the
not
thing
all
is-
people that are leaving because of a short term of
Well,
teaching.
The numbers aren't particularly meaningful unless you have other comparables. I mean,
Exactly.
you can
You need
argue
some
that
background to evaluate
you
them
wanted
against.
more
I'm-
comprehension in the report.
Well, I think I think we beat this one up as far as the topic. Do you need more information from Chip?
I'll take it up with him offline. How about that?
Sounds good.
Okay, because I think you have more things that you two maybe can come up to,
I think
coming up with things that meet some of his questions that.
Yeah.
I think
We're
there
not-
may be other things, and some of it we may take for granted because we've seen it through the years. That's a different issue. I still would say that I agree with Chip's assessment that he's in compliance on one
Okay,
here.
all right, that's fine. I don't want to.
And maybe this is the place, if we do have that retention, how many people stay within the less than 5 years, it probably ought to come into here as an EL chart versus somewhere else.
And maybe that it was reported in the past here, and that we're just moved on. But we know the new teacher support program in the past, the evidence has been very strong that it makes a difference.
I'd be happy to get that to less than 5-year turnover rate if you'd like.
I was just going to add, at the last WASDA legislative meeting, this issue came up, and we actually had a presentation by Gary Kipp from the State Principals Association and another spokesperson from that organization, and that was one issue they brought up is how do you really support your best people? Granted, there's maybe some latitude as far as how we determine who the best people are, but it's a concern that it's a statewide concern. Is that how do you support once you do determine who your best people are? How do you support them?
Right, and I guess that was kind of what I was like. If you know who they are, then you can support them. But I think what I hear Chip saying is that we support everyone uniformly, and that's basically what we can do. And overall, it works.
And what I don't understand is what the expectations are around if we have a stellar performer. I have no if they decide they don't like it here anymore, I have no tools to
entice them to
but
stay.
you do, because, and I mean, there's lots of articles and research on this. Money isn't the only thing that keeps people teaching. It's also the facilities, the support, the collegial environment, the support for continuing education, et cetera. So, I mean, there's huge amounts of things, and it's not going to be the same for your early teacher and your veteran teacher. I just don't know if you can
I
report it
agree
all
with
here.
all of those things, and the however is that when you look at any of those things, facilities, money, support for continuing education, money, comp, money, getting along with their colleagues, money. I mean, all of these things cost money. All I'm saying is that
Well, you've been doing really well in many of those areas,
yes,
I believe,
I
with
would
the
agree
money
with
that
as
we
well.
have.
How is getting along with colleagues' money?
Well, okay, let me put it differently. If you want to know what my priority is not to worry about retaining high-level staff people, because I think we do a pretty good job of that. My priority right now is to make sure that we have a high-quality teacher in a classroom every day with kids. My priority right now is to deal with our low performers, not to deal with our high performers, because, again, I think that we do a good job of retaining those staff. What would be an interesting number if we look at the 109 that left, the 79 that resigned, it would be interesting to ask the question, what years of experience were they left, and is there any data that we can collect around why they left? That's a fair question to ask. But again, I am not going to spend lots and lots of time and energy on getting retention strategies in place when I think our resources need to be spent on those teachers that are mediocre and weak.
Okay.
I will grant that in our current climate, but I do think that if you, for some reason, all of a sudden we started losing good teachers, then we would need to pay attention to that.
That's
But I
fair.
think that what we have right now in place does pay attention to that.
Well, and I think on behalf of our students that the effort does have to be on the teachers that are not so good, because we need those classrooms to have good experience in education. Okay, anything else on tab 23 and EL 11? If not, we'll move to EL 14.
That's under tab 24. There's one item in EL 14 that's in partial compliance, and I think there's been agreement that this is not a priority for the board or for me, and therefore it stays in partial compliance, and that is that we make this linkage between budget and end results, and we've just decided that that's not a priority right now.
I think our end results, we've all agreed, need to be more robust before we can make the connections come in place.
And everything else is in compliance. And I do think that once we have our end results in better shape, we may be able to contemplate that.
Okay.
And then the next one is EL 15, which is under tab 25, and everything in that EL is in compliance.
Okay, and then, is it Soup's report time?
Okay, Soup's report.
Soup's report time.
We have 3 items for the superintendent's report. The first is we have been, at the last board retreat, we did talk about doing a rebranding of the district image because it's dated. But we also have some pretty substantial concerns that we don't expend a lot of resources in order to do this rebranding. And so Catherine and her team, the communications team, took on a rebranding process over the last several months. It was an internal process and therefore did not cost the district any additional resources and will be implemented gradually over time, which also will be conserving resources. So I'm going to hand it over to Catherine for a quick report on the rebranding process for the Lake Washington School District image. Microphone.
There we go. As noted, we've talked about branding and rebranding. We're obviously not a major corporation which relies on its brand to sell products, but the visual image that reflects who we are is often the first thing that people will see about us. And there has been some discomfort on the part of many, and especially me, about whether our current logo actually reflects who we are as an organization visually. From my point of view, we have a few issues with this logo. Some are more practical, i.e. it's a vertical logo, which is often harder to deal with in design issues. A horizontal logo is a lot easier to design with for a number of things. But the typeface and the coloring is somewhat dated. My understanding from our deputy superintendent is that this logo has been essentially intact for the last 30 years. And as a fairly progressive and future-looking organization, I'm not sure that this really expresses who we are. So we have had some discussions about progressing with some change. In the process of looking at potential change, we did look, our team did look at some other school district logos. So there's a little bit of few of local logos here. We did look at district logos around the country and discovered that they tend to fall into about 4 different categories. There's sort of about 4 different ways that school districts approach their logos. Some are geographically connected. School districts cover specific areas, so they want to connect to a specific geographic feature. As you can see with Issaquah School District's logo, there's a geographic rendering of where they are. Shoreline takes a less literal view, but it's still kind of a geographic piece. There are other school districts that go the route of Seattle Public Schools and have some abstract human figures, usually at least one small one representing children. Those are difficult to do. It's tough to get a good one. We saw a lot of not so good ones, but it's kind of difficult to make that work. There are other school districts that go with pretty traditional images of schools, books, apples, schoolhouses, those kinds of things. And then there are others that simply take a basic typographic view. So we first of all looked at all those other school districts and then also thought about who we are as a school district and what we want our district to look like. As we did the new website a couple of years ago, we did actually look at some of the work that we've done as a district around who we are, at our mission and vision statements, at some of our internal culture work, and came up with some nice work that was used in the development of the website. And we wanted to make sure that we did something that was complementary to that website. It's a look that we've thought has better represented the organization. So we kept that in mind as we looked as well. These are a few of the words that we worked with as we developed a design brief on the new design. These you'll recognize from much of the work that we've done around the vision and some of the other work in the student profile. So this was part of the design brief that we put together. As we developed the design brief, we looked at what we can do. Financially, we have no money to do a new logo. It's not the right time to spend any money on things like logos, and as a school district, we have to be fiscally responsible. But we did want to see what we could do with our internal resources in terms of coming up with something that better represented who we are. So we did put together the design brief, and I challenged our internal graphic artist, Chelsea Lee, to see what she could come up with as a representation of the school district. We did move towards something that is in one of the 4 categories of standard school district logos. We did go with something that's connected to our geographic representation, and in fact, it really goes to simply an updating and modernizing of our past sailboats, our Lake Washington logo. But as you will see, it looks a little bit different.
Oh, this one looks orange.
A couple of the items about it is that there's a sense of forward motion. Our old sailboats were pretty static and stationary. They didn't move. These sailboats are clearly moving forward. It's simplified. It's a more modern typeface. It really, I think, did a pretty good job of capturing something that is more modern, more in keeping with who we are. The colors are those that are in the district website currently, so they match very well with what's going on there. We also did check to make sure, since we do a lot of copying around here, so a lot of materials get put on that copier and copied many times. We wanted to make sure that the logo was one that would work when we got to that 15th generation and would still be okay. These are some examples of letterhead and envelope of how they will look with the new logo. And there's my new business card. So this is the proposal for a new logo. It is not something that will cost us money. In fact, we are asking that as people use up their business card and letterhead, that's when the new logo comes in. We're not asking that anyone get rid of any materials currently. We don't want to spend the money on getting rid of old stuff. We are going to simply phase in the new logo as it's needed for new materials. So it's simply a replacement as needed as we go forward.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Which is,
It's orange up there.
well, and that's consistent with what King County did when they moved from the Crown logo to the Martin Luther King logo, and we just kind of phased it in over time, and that makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense.
Thank you, Catherine. The second area of superintendent's report, I'd like to report on our 6-year capital facilities plan. Each year, the district's required to submit to the board a capital facilities plan, and we need to submit it to King County so they can approve the plan in order for us to collect impact fees. Our current 2010 to 2015 capital facilities plan was produced in May of 2010 and then presented to King County in late June for comment. There was no material comments to date. And then once we secure those comments, then we submit it to you for consideration and approval. As per policy, there is a 14 calendar day comment period, which began on August 9th and ends on August 16th. And we will then bring it to the board on August 23rd for approval, because it needs to be approved before the end of the month so that we can get it in the chute to collect impact fees. The material substance of that plan, which again you'll be considering formally on August 23rd, shows some slight changes in our student generation rates. The single-family student generation rate is down slightly, and the multifamily is bigger slightly, which means that there are fewer kids living in single-family homes and more kids living in apartments, according to the current statistics. It also shows that we do have enrollment growth, as you know. We're expecting by 2015 for enrollment to grow 2,837 students, which is just under a 12% increase. We're seeing that growth occurring primarily at the elementary school level currently and primarily in the east side of the district. Currently, our school modernization program has accommodated some of that growth by about 300 students. We have overall capacity, which is permanent capacity plus portable capacity for 25,629 students. The permanent capacity, which you pull the portables out, we have capacity for 22,170. So we have portables for about 3,500 students. Even with the permanent, by increasing the permanent capacity, the full-time student enrollment exceeds the permanent capacity by 1,700 students. And so if by 2015 we don't deal with this, we're not going to have enough space for the kids. And we've talked about this consistently over the past year. So our plans at this point are to complete phase 2 of the modernization program, to construct 2 new elementary schools over time. Currently, those projects have not been funded. Add portables, change grade configuration, so we're creating capacity at the elementary level by 2012. Do some feeder shifts, which we've begun to implement. Possibly some boundary readjustments in specific parts of the district, and present phase 3 modernization in 2014 to the voters. All of these things are contained in the capital facility plan. Again, none of this should be surprising to the board. This is all consistent with conversations we've had over the past year, and we've received no comment from King County to date.
After 2011 June, when the majority of a huge chunk of King County becomes a city of Kirkland, do we have a lot left in King County that will be impacted, that we get impact fees from? Are there still some pockets, aren't there, out in the Redmond area?
Yes, that is a worry of ours, and that is a concern, so yes.
Yeah, because right now we get no impact fees from the city of Kirkland.
Correct. Okay. And so that's a conversation that we'll be having with the city of Kirkland in short order about both in the short term and in the long term what the impacts are on the district as a result of the annexation.
I'm also a little bit concerned, and hopefully it's a very small people, but number of people with this view, but there was a letter to the editor in the Kirkland paper that I called Jackie about. There's some people who are saying that the failure of the bond was a vote against going to four-year high schools. And we have never assumed that, interpreted that way, or felt there was any reason to interpret. We have far stronger evidence of public support for four-year high schools, apart from the issue of trying to accelerate the remodeling of Juanita High School.
Yeah, and as a matter of fact, Nancy, that's a good point. Not only did we not feel it, but we actually did post-election data collection specifically asking that question. And the data bore out exactly as we would expect, that approximately 70% of our community is supportive of going to four-year high schools, and about 30% would prefer not to. And this is consistent with what we found pre-election and is consistent with what we've been hearing across the system for the last 2 years. We believe that both as a result of the facility needs at the elementary level, our beliefs around what is good for kids and their ability to become prepared for college, and our community view of the situation, that moving forward with four-year high schools, regardless of whether the bond measure passed or failed, and regardless of whether a funding measure passes or fails in the future, is in the best interest of the district and is a place where we are intending on going. The funding or non-funding of a facility measure is going to be a function of how painful that process is, to be honest with you, specifically at the secondary level. But there's no question in my mind, we need to go, we have decided to go, and we are going in the fall of 2012.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Lastly,
was gonna say-
sorry, number 3.
I was going to say that was one, too.
The last 2 weeks have had administrators back in their buildings, and I wanted to do just a quick update for the board on what they've been up to. We did a pretty dramatic shift in the work that we do in August, in that we heard quite a bit of feedback over the last couple of years that when we're talking about the development and improvement of our staff, and in this case, administrators, it is become clearly more productive for us to develop those folks over time rather than giving them 2 weeks of content in August and expecting them to remember in November what they learned in August. So we've redesigned what we do with our administrators during this time of the year. We no longer call it August Institute, so the words August Institute are now dead.
Woo.
And if you call it August Institute, you get fined $5. And now what we simply have called them is our regular meeting schedule. So we had a DLT meeting today, an August DLT meeting, where we kicked off the year and did some of the vision work and then started digging into the work that they need to get school started. We will do additional meetings in October and November and January and March and May, et cetera, and spread that work out throughout the year. So I wanted to have Tracy just give us a small snippet of the work that administrators are working on right now, and also just make a comment about some of their feedback about the change in structure and schedule.
Great. Well, one thing I wanted to mention is, we have 11 new building administrators, elementary principals, assistant and associate principals at secondary. So we did bring in our new administrators for new administrator orientation, which is something that we haven't really focused on previously. So we spent 2 days with them, with the directors of school support and other members of central leadership team, really orienting them to the district and to our mission, vision, our guiding principles, our student profile. We gave them in-depth training on the teacher professional growth and evaluation system, and covered some specific topics like technology, curriculum and assessment, and special education, really just trying to give them as much information as they need to get the year started and to join the DLT today, kind of having a sense of what we're talking about when we're talking about the profile and some of those things. As Chip mentioned today, we had DLT. He did a great job with some motivational words on leadership and a presentation in the morning, which we then had some opportunity as a whole district leadership team to debrief and discuss, what can we take from this, and how can this influence us moving forward into the year. We then broke out into level-based sessions, so we had the elementary administrators, secondary administrators, and our professional technical DLT members in different groups, covering such topics as technology and learning what the new IT squared requirements are going to be, so they can then share that with their staffs during August LEAP. The elementary principals got the new assessing and reporting handbook to accompany the new elementary report card and conference schedule, and so that was also a big highlight of today. We spent time with the secondary on school configuration planning and really getting that 24-month timeline in front of people and developing a lot of the questions that we need to get answered and how are we going to actually go about tackling this work together. And elementary also focused on the new math, implementation of the new math materials. Prof Tech and secondary work together on the school configuration part. Then tomorrow we'll be back here in levels. So we've got level meetings, elementary in the morning, secondary in the afternoon, and then Prof Tech on Wednesday. And that's our annual policies and procedures, required trainings, and those kinds of nuts and bolts kind of information that folks need to get the year started off right. So feedback so far has been great. Principals have been very attentive and with us mentally and physically, because they're able to also attend to the hiring and work that has to be done at the buildings. So they're not sort of pulled mentally back to their building while we're trying to, as Chip said, cram a bunch of information into their head. So it's been a nice balance, and it's going well.
I did also just want to mention, since Tracy mentioned math, We offered optional math training for elementary teachers this summer, and upwards of 85% of the teachers in the district came in during the summer and took advantage of the optional math training, which was just unheard of. Matt was flabbergasted and thrilled to have that many teachers, and I'm highly optimistic that we will have a very, very successful math implementation. So,
Great. Great. Okay. Anything else? That's it?
that's it.
Okay, Ledge update. Doug?
Yeah, real quickly. Two things. A week from Tuesday is Election Day.
Yes.
And, it's interesting to see how this August primary, this will be, I think, the second August primary that we've had. And so just want to encourage everybody to vote. And the House is up for, the entire House is up for election in November, and a lot of decisions about who's going to be on the ballot in November will be made a week from Tuesday. So encourage folks that care about education to really read their voters' pamphlets and look and try to discern who's a friend of public education. And then the other thing is, on the federal level, Speaker Pelosi has called the House back into session to address the education employment bill. And I don't know exactly, I haven't had a chance to talk to staff about how that might directly affect Lake Washington School District, but I suspect that there will be some positive impact to our district if that legislation is acted upon by Congress.
Okay. Any follow-up items from the board that needed to be addressed, or no? You did the ones in briefs that had to do with the budget.
Yes.
And the special ed. So that came out. Anything else anybody else needed?
I have one that I still owe the board, and that's one that Jackie generated on graduation rates, and we will deal with that when we do ER1 in September.
Okay. Any future agenda items? Okay, and debriefing? Any comments from the board? Okay, before we adjourn, just an announcement that we normally don't have a second meeting in August, but we will this time. It's going to be one of those years, I have a feeling. We will have a brief meeting which will be at 5, and will be actually consent agenda probably on this capital plan, 6-year capital facilities plan, and also then what we agreed to do with the online learning policy. And then we will go directly from that, and we will be having a work session to begin discussing potential bond and levy needs for the district. So that's the August meeting. Then on September 13th, we will have a 5 o'clock work session again on the continuing discussion about the process on bond and levy potentials, and our regular board meeting is at 7. And I'll announce this in September, but contrary for those who are listening at home, contrary to something I've seen, that we have confusing times of when our board meetings are. We usually have 2 meetings a month. The first meeting of every month is at 7 p.m. We may have a work session before it. If it's a month with a second meeting, that meeting's at 5:30. The only month that's different is June. In June, because we don't have a July meeting, both meetings begin at 7. So there is consistency to our meeting plan. So I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move we adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Meeting's adjourned.